Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Rumi Forum's panel discussion on family's role in society in 21st century. We are very privileged to have three distinguished speakers from all over the country, practically. And our panel chair, Ms. Jenna Lutke, will go ahead and later on tell you about the construction of the panel. But I would like to make a reminder of a standard procedure. Please silence your cell phones so they don't interrupt. Okay, so that's that. Now I would like to welcome Rumi Forum's president, Mr. Emre Çelik, to deliver the opening remarks. Then we're going to proceed to the speakers.
Good morning, one and all. I would like to begin by quoting a few people whose words I'm sure will resonate with many of you in regards to family. And I quote, "Other things may change us, but we start and end with family." Anthony Brandt. "It is not flesh and blood, but the heart which makes us fathers and sons." Johann Schiller. "The happiest moments of my life have been the few which I have passed at home in the bosom of my family." Thomas Jefferson. And finally, "The family is a haven in a heartless world." Christopher Leish. There are many definitions to what a family is and its importance to both its members and the wider society. The honorary president of the Rumi Forum, a world-renowned thinker and activist, Mr. Fethullah Gülen, stresses in many of his discourses and writings the importance that one places in one's own heart and mind, as alluded to by some of the quotes I have mentioned. The heart, of course, is another conference unto itself, but one aspect that the heart helps to develop is respect. And Gülen stresses that the building blocks of a successful society is a successful family, and integral to family success is respect shown and given to each of its members, the parents being pivotal as a crucial link and role model to how this is done. Of course, there are many other aspects and dimensions that can be attributed to a successful family, and I know some of these will be discussed today. I thank the speakers in advance for their words and hope, like me, that you are all anxious to hear what they say. Thank you and enjoy this panel.
Our first speaker is Dr. Eunice Beatty. And as you can see up on the PowerPoint, she will talk about the family in general, me, you, and us. Dr. Eunice Beatty is a retired professor from the University of Kentucky. She was a full-time faculty member at the Bluegrass Community and Technical College. And Dr. Beatty taught in the departments of educational psychology, family science, and dental hygiene. Please welcome Dr. Eunice Beatty.
Thank you, Jenna. And I am very honored to be here today. And first of all, let me just say I have a terrible cold and a little bit of a fever, but I was just insistent on coming and making this presentation. So hopefully I won't sound too nasal and I can get through the presentation today. But it is an honor to be here with you today to talk about family. And the three things that the Rumi Forum wanted to focus on, I chose to focus on the social aspect and action and responsibility. And we're going to be looking at the 21st century family trends and issues. Now, let me also say before I get started is that there are a lot of different ways of looking at the trends and issues of family today. One of the areas that I always enjoy approaching it from is from a religious standpoint. However, today I'm not going to go the religious standpoint. I am going from a contemporary standpoint. So we'll cover some of those trends and issues that seem to be out there, maybe good, maybe bad, and then hopefully at the end we'll sort of be able to pull those together and talk about them in more of a global way, or looking at the trends and issues. The presentation style, I'm going to ask you to sort of look at family as it relates to home. And so as I move through this, you will be able to interact a little bit more with that piece of it. When we think about families today, we really do think about a lot of different types of families. The family is still paramount in our society. No matter how it changes, no matter how it gets transformed, we still look at family as a paramount institution. Every generation of families has undergone a certain amount of change, and maybe that's the reason that we often say there are no perfect families. And if you think you have a perfect family, I generally say if you wait a few days or a few weeks, something will happen that you're not so happy with your family. And if you think that you don't have a perfect family, if you wait a few days, something will happen and you'll be very pleased or happy about your family. So they're always changing because obviously we're all individuals and we're moving through various stages. So journey with me just for a few moments and we'll visit the house that many families live in. Envision from your own perspective family. Now, what we want to do is take just a closer look at what it means to have family and some of the issues that we are facing today with family. It looks like a family lives here. We don't know who lives here. We don't know if there are children, how many children. We don't know the type of form or structure of the family, but it looks like a family may actually live here. When we think about families in the past and present and then project into the future, we also think about families having similar blueprints, just as our homes have similar blueprints. Things are different, but for the most part, the blueprint stays the same. We also look at similar framework of families, and we can also see similar rooms that families may enjoy. So what's really changing, or what is changing about the American family? When we look just closer, we are looking for trends and issues, and I trust that rather than show you a lot of data and statistics, I'm going to actually circulate for you a handout that will include some of the resources that I've used here. Okay, let's start with the curb appeal. And again, I'm looking at the family as a house. So sort of follow with me as we talk about covering the house in the way of looking at family and some of the issues and trends. When we think about curb appeal, one of the very first things we have to think about in today's terms are who am I? Is it really all about me? Because some of what we're seeing happening with families really are looking at the individual. The estimated median age for the first marriage in 2007, for females it was 26, and for males it was 27. That is up significantly from 1970, when the median age was 20 for females and 23 for males. So we have to look at how people are viewing themselves in relationships. Areas on singlehood, delayed marriage, cohabitation, childbirth decline, females being fully engaged in the workforce, attitude and value changes, more egalitarian roles, an increased divorce rate. All of those things are actually contributing to this idea of curb appeal, how individuals see themselves, and when individuals decide that they want to engage in a relationship that may be long-term or end up in a family structure. If we think about the front porch or a welcome mat, we have to think about selecting the right mate and some of the issues that are that we're facing around changing gender roles. Contemporary gender roles are more egalitarian. People tend to take on roles, males take on some female roles, females take on some male roles, that look very different in our society today than traditionally. However, even in our 21st century, it's very easy for this to become sort of a swinging door, because people, while they're comfortable having those contemporary roles, they're also very comfortable slipping back into very traditional roles. So oftentimes when we think about contemporary issues, if we look really closely, there are a lot of times where we actually retreat back into some very traditional roles, and both the male and the female are comfortable with that. Popular culture and mass media have a significant influence on our gender roles. Teenagers, when they're thinking about contemporary terms for dating, now we're hearing other terms outside of just dating, hanging out, getting together, pack dating, hooking up. All of those are terms that we hear teens use in selecting the right mate, or even looking at changing gender roles. We see females asking males out, so that it's not so traditional where males are the ones always asking females out. Young adults and older, 52% of females and 57% of males prefer a dinner date for a first date. So that really hasn't changed all that much. When you think about the traditional role of family and dating and selecting the right mate, the dinner date is still very popular. Now, when you look closely at some of those issues, and we could stay on these for and just talk just on one topic, and we don't have time to do that, but just the dinner date, and one of the reasons that's so popular, females really enjoy talking and that intimate relationship. Males enjoy doing, and so the dinner date really works because males are eating, doing, and females are talking, and usually at a table you have that close, intimate relationship. So I would encourage you, the next time you're out to dinner with your significant other, check that out, why the dinner date is so popular. But then also check out who usually is the person who says, okay, we're finished, it's time to go. Okay? So I'll leave that for you to do a little study on your own. Marriage gradient, looking at age and religion and socioeconomic, race and ethnicity, of selecting the right mate. Those things still seem to be very traditional in approach, but they can be contemporary as well, particularly like age, and we just talked about the median age for marriage. Marketplaces for selecting the right mate. Marketplaces typically have been associated with age, socioeconomics, race, ethnicity. And now we're getting into cyber dating and online dating. So that's going to bring in another fully contemporary approach to selecting the right mate. Over the threshold, marriage still is very much a part of the American way, but so is cohabitation. So on one hand, we may be saying, I do. On the other hand, we may be saying, well, maybe. Cohabitation is continuing to rise in the United States. In 1997, 5% of the unmarried population, heterosexual couples, were cohabitating. So that's about 4 million. In 1960, there were only about 400,000 cohabitating. Now, United States is not unique in this. In fact, we really lag significantly behind other countries. For example, Denmark has been cohabitating for many, many decades. So, attitudes and values toward living together, premarital sex, over the past 3 to 4 decades has become increasingly more acceptable. Now, that doesn't say that we have lost all value of looking at living together versus marriage, because we still have a significant number of marriages and religious marriages in the United States. But we do have a increasing acceptance of cohabitation and living together. Extramarital relations, however, are still opposed, heavily opposed, even in our contemporary 21st century, looking at family. Extramarital relations are opposed today in the 70s as well, are opposed today the same as they were in the 70s. In fact, in the 70s, they were probably a little more liberal, but somewhere between, depending on the studies that you look at, 79 to 81% actually say that infidelity is wrong. And we certainly have had our share of that in the media, in the news here lately. Okay, if we take a look at the family room, the changing structure. When we think of structure, I'm thinking of gender roles. We've already talked about that. Dual earning families, the structure of the family. When we think of changing forms, we're thinking of, yes, we still have a nuclear family, but we also have multicultural or multi-ethnic families, same-sex families, blended families, or what we traditionally have called step families, single-parent families. When we look at values, decrease in family size is a value. I mean, we have control over that. That's going to make a big difference when we start looking at the aging population and the number of children that we decide to have, or the size of families in the next few decades. Parenting styles. Do father and mother roles really matter? Or can a mother play a father role? Can a father play a mother role? Those are issues that we may or may not have answers for, but they are significant for the wellness of our children, and we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. We've already mentioned cohabitation in marriage, the increase in divorce, workplace flexibility, and in general values around morals, specifically religious morals or personal moral value systems. And then new beginnings, remarriages, single-parent families, widowhood, singlehood, which is sort of going to be sort of a new contemporary family, because we're seeing men die at a younger age than women, but women are living longer, and there are larger numbers, particularly with the baby boomers moving in that direction. And so this whole idea of widowhood, singlehood, is certainly a 21st century contemporary issue. The extra bedrooms, those extra bedrooms in the house are focused on caregiving for loved ones. The sandwich generation, meaning those people that are middle-aged to older, caring for their children and aging parents. The Boomerang Generation, those young adults moving back home, or maybe who have never left home. In 1990, about 21% of 25-year-olds lived with both parents. In 1970, only 15% of the 25-year-olds lived with both parents. And the grandparent, these are grandparents who are actually raising their grandchildren as a parent. And we see a growing trend with that. And that's particularly in African American families where we see grandparents raising their grandchildren. Now we see it in all ethnicities, but there is a significant increase in African American parents, which correlates with the number of teen pregnancies in the African American community, the number of divorces, so all of that sort of fits in when we look at those contemporary issues. When we look at the kids' room, again, some of these topics we could just stay on probably for the entire session. We're just going to sort of move through these. Parenting from infants to tots and teens. It's always interesting to look at the cost of children, and maybe that's why people have decided to decrease the number of children in their families. We've gone from anywhere in the 30s and 40s, 1930s and 40s, where there may have been anywhere from 9 to 12, 15 children, to only 2 children in the last few decades. But when we look at from birth to age 17, if you have a high income, and a high income being approximately $100,000 per year, then the cost of raising that child from birth to age 17 is about $280,000. If we look at a middle income, and we're looking at middle income as approximately $58,000, the cost from birth to age 17 is about $190,000 to raise that child. And a lower income, which is approximately $27,000, is $139,000 to raise a child from birth to age 17. And we know that there are lots of issues around children and children's needs and the expense of children that cause people to decide that they don't want to spend a lot of dollars on children, or they don't want to have so many children in their family. Some of the 21st century child rearing education, when we think about how you should be rearing your child in the 21st century. Now this is sort of interesting because a couple of studies note that respect, consistency and clarity, logical consequences, open communication, no physical punishment, and behavior modification systems are key to rearing children in the 21st century. And while I agree with all of those, I always have to say, but these have to be well-educated parents to be able to implement those. Because there are a lot of parents who don't quite understand what it means to do consistency and clarity, or behavior modification. So while those are definitely good attributes for child rearing, there needs to be a lot of education in the 21st century for all parents to be able to rear their children in that way. Now, some of the real parent issues, the things that parents, when I'm talking to groups, talk about difficulty, are parenting styles, particularly if the mother and the father have different parenting styles, or there's a stepchild involved, or biological father and then a stepfather, or biological mother and a stepmother. How do you deal with all of those parenting styles? Discipline, particularly spanking, that still seems to be a key issue. Interestingly enough, that spanking seems to be more significant with African American parents, because many African American parents spank. And today we're saying in our contemporary society that there should be no spanking. So how do you balance that out with and give parents tools that they can actually use and implement? Nutritional health, daycare, technology, education, financial awareness, activity calendars. When is it too full, the activity calendar? Dating, family quality time, and stepchildren are all issues that parents tend to bring up around 21st century child rearing. Now, when we look at the master bedroom, we think about couples who care. We can't cover all of the trends and issues, but some things still are fairly constant. So don't forget what it means to be best friends, have date night, create a second honeymoon, knowing that infidelity is a no-no, understanding sexuality particularly as couples begin to age, and things like the phenomenon of, is there really a 7-year itch? It seems that divorce rate, usually by the 8th year, if people are going to divorce, it's during that time. And there are studies that still talk about a 7-year itch, that there just needs to be some change there. But couples can do that on their own. When we look at contemporary happy couples and long-term love, some of the characteristics are similar values, attitudes, interests, and sometimes personality traits. And also that for contemporary couples, happy couples, and long-term love, they tend to share a philosophy on life, religion, or vision that, regardless of their minor differences, that helps them stay focused. They tend to be fair-minded, autonomous, emotionally responsive, trust each other, and enjoy spending time together. Now, they also talk about spending time apart, that it's important to spend time apart for their own individuality. Hobbies, careers, sports, etc. Now, one of the things that we talk about in the contemporary and as well as the traditional, this hasn't changed much, is does having money make couples stay together better or longer? Having enough income is important, and although money may not buy love, its absence can cause couples to fall out of love. So it is important to have enough income. Even though we don't really like to focus on that, we still have to look at those issues. Cooking in the kitchen, we're looking at grandparents and the role of grandparents. In the year of 2000, 1 out of 8 people were over the age of 65. And that means today's 60 to 65-year-old grandparents are sort of the young, old grandparent because we are healthier. And so with grandparenting, people tend to enjoy their grandkids more, even though they may be 60 or 65. The good news is that we have an increasingly aging, healthy population. Thus, more children will have an opportunity to know their grandparents, if that is true, that those baby boomers are thinking more about taking care of themselves. The not so good news is that as marriages are delayed and having children are delayed, that this may actually cancel out that increased grandparent-grandchild interaction. If it doesn't, there is a chance that children may actually have positive interactions with grandparents, great-grandparents, and great-great-grandparents. And that will actually take about 5 generations in order to experience that. And in most cases, 3 to 4 generations at one time is generally what we see living. Grandchildren living in the home with their grandparents, and we talked about this some. About 12% of African Americans live with their grandparents. About 4% white and about 6% Latinos are actually living with grandparents. Now that could be with their parents or with only one parent, but again, the number seems to be significantly higher with African Americans. And some of that is attributed to just the historical approach for African Americans and the extended family of caregiving. Kitchen table talk. Lots of issues could be talked about under this particular area. I've chose to focus on money, careers, and economics. When we think about juggling work and family and all of the spillover that actually occurs with that, unemployment as well as employment, trying to decide who's going to be employed, who is not going to be employed, particularly in dual earning couples or families. Money, how do we sort through the money matters? Do we have his money, her money, and our money, or do we have just our money? Who is the trailing spouse? A really important item for contemporary couples in the 21st century. Who is the trailing spouse when both of you have careers? Commuter marriages, when wives earn more than their husbands, and the wage gap still around gender as well as ethnicity. And communication, the mailbox. Are we really still taking time to listen, or has technology really become such a way of life that we are not actually interacting and listening to each other? Couples tend to fight about or have conflicting areas of money, housework, fidelity, children, and privacy. Now, we think of those as contemporary issues, but those are also very traditional. When you look at studies from the 70s, 60s, and 70s, those are still key issues of miscommunication or conflict areas. Communication also within and between all members of the family. We don't just want to focus on the couple themselves, but between siblings, between in-laws, between stepchildren, all of those become very significant on how we are communicating with each other and who has the power. Again, when we think of, for example, stepchildren and the power of biological parents versus step-parents, that creates some of that conflict in the home. Now, the doghouse, and for those people that are dog lovers, I don't mean this to be a negative, I just needed some place to put family violence and abuse, and so the doghouse was small, so we put them in the doghouse. Okay? About 20% of women and 3% of men say that they have been physically assaulted by their current or former spouse or partner. Now, that's data from 2003, and we think that those percentages are extremely low because many people don't even report that they, particularly when they are being abused by an intimate partner, they don't tend to report that. But those still tend to be issues in the 21st century. Jealousy, family violence and abuse, family health abuse, things like alcohol, drugs, depression, suicide, eating disorders, all of those are still issues that we have to deal with as a family. and breaking the whole cycle of family violence and abuse. One in 5 American adults have divorced at least once. And studies within the last 5 years in 2005 indicate that 94% people believe in the United States believe that divorce is a serious problem in the United States. Now we know that when the No-Fault Divorce Act came about in the early to mid 70s, that actually sort of expedited people to get divorces. They didn't have to place blame, and so we've seen an increase over the last 3 or 4 decades. But it still is a problem for us because from a family perspective, we'd like to think that people could work through those issues more or better. And then when we think about divorce and then the remarriage, that also creates another layer for us, because data does say that it takes a while for you to move through a divorce. And then if you remarry, and then sometimes even divorce again, then you've got several layers of trying to move through situations where individuals are involved, and particularly when children are involved as well. Children of divorces tend to suffer a lot more than we think. I often say one way of treating or solving the problem would be, instead of the children rotating every other weekend, have the parents rotate every other weekend. So they move out of their house, leave the children in their house, because children do sort of get caught in between that situation, and we all know what that feels like to be moved from location to location. And I don't think we probably place enough emphasis on how divorces in America affect children. Okay. And in the living room, I think we still have a significant amount of people who value traditional morals and values around family. Religious morals and values still place judgment on right and wrongness. And even though contemporary terms like cohabitation, divorce, premarital sex may be on the rise and may be certainly increasingly more acceptable, there are people that are very much outspoken against, and it's generally from a religious moral value perspective. Health. American children born in 1990 have a life expectancy of about 78 years. And so if we implement good health, good nutrition, then we're looking at children that are going to be healthier than in their life period or lifetime over the next 70 years. By 2030, there will be more elderly people, 65 years and older, than young people. And obviously this is due to a decrease in birth rates. Rooftop. This is sort of a global look at the 21st century trends and issues. And we've covered all of those. It's just that I've sort of put them into the top 10. Family and form and structure, economic factors, popular culture and social movements, ethnic and racial diversity, children's well-being, health wellness, poverty, the elderly, technology, and family policies. And the 5 foundations. And these actually go for both traditional as well as contemporary. These still tend to be, regardless of when you're looking at studies, these tend to be the foundations that most people say are important attributes for the family. Okay, so how do you see it? Is the glass half empty or half full? If you're looking through a magnifying glass, are trends and issues smaller than they really appear? Or are we not making, are we making too much out of some of the trends and issues that we see occurring for the 21st century? Are you viewing families through your own personal lenses and thinking, if it doesn't affect me, if it doesn't affect my family, it doesn't affect me? Or are you thinking, what affects one family affects all families? An example of that could be same-sex families. And if your child's best friend has parents of the same sex, so what affects one family affects all families? Or does it really make any difference? Or is it an hourglass? And is there really enough time for us to ensure that all families will be happy and healthy? So when we look at the 21st century transformational family times, you can be the judge. And as you're being the judge of those, this little fellow probably is wondering what the next few decades will leave for him as a family.